right, let's go ahead and take a look at other stories. Well, the members of the newly signed Petroleum Industry Act include the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, that's Timmy Silva. He is to serve as the chairman of the committee. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Dr. Nasir Sani Gwarzo, is a member. The GMD of the NNPC, Melekiari, member. Executive Chairman of the FIRS, Mohammed Nami, member. SSA to the President on Natural Resources, that's Natural Resources, Olufemi Lee Jadu is the external legal advisor. The PTDF Executive Secretary, Dr. Bello Aliu Gusau, the head of Coordinating Secretariat and Working Group. And also, representative of the Ministry of Justice, a member. Representative of the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, a member.
All right, to continue the conversation on the Petroleum Law Implementation Committee, Barrister Frank Tietie, a legal practitioner, joins us now. Frank, glad to have you join us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Let's start off on this note. The primary responsibility of this committee is to guide the effective and timely implementation of the PIA and ensure that the institutions created deliver on their mandate. Any pitfalls can there? What are your expectations?
Oh, well, nothing much except that the speed is something that should be noted. The speed with which the President assented to the bill and to sit at an implementation committee followed immediately. It shows that a trail is being blazed here, but I think there are a lot more to it. There's a lot more to it, especially the political considerations. We haven't yet seen the act. Members of the National Assembly that communicated the act, the bill to the President, individual members, to the best of my knowledge, haven't seen it. Those of us in the civil society, generally, even as lawyers, we haven't seen it. And so probably we'll be learning new things as the implementation goes on. So I think that the speed is something that may, in the long run, not be too helpful in carrying the public along, which is very important because a lot has been said about breaking the genes, and then what we need to see it being translated to actually helping the industry. And the host communities are, very worried because we're seeing the speed with which the implementation committee, steering committee is being set up. Would that also translate to the immediate implementation, the contributions that will be made in terms of 3% of operational expenses of oil companies operating in those host communities will also be implemented to the extent that monies will start coming to those host communities for the purpose of development? Would we see that? Would we see all of those accounts set up with all those trust funds and the
modalities?
Yes. So we would also expect, but if you look at the makeup of the steering committee, apart from the political figure in terms of the minister, we don't really see that representation that would translate the bill, because the behemoth of that bill is the interest of the host community, and there is tempers arising with regards to the way the president has gone about it.
Just the host community. It's for Nigeria. You know what you said? We've not seen. Barrister Tietie, let's be clear here. You do say that we haven't seen this act as it is, as assented to by Mr. President. But some things are clear to us. Is the fact that after the National Assembly committees and even the Harmonization Committee, we know that 3% is there. And just yesterday, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources did explain the fact that 3% as it is right now would really help boost investors' confidence. Because at the end of the day, this is a framework that is set up to ensure that at least we start making money. And of course, we've always made
money from crude oil, from oil and gas in our country.
But we're seeing oil companies really move away from
We've only seen uncertainties.
So
we are talking about the international oil companies now operating with some measure of certainties, extracting from them a measure of certain money in terms of a certain percentage in terms of their operational expenses. Before now, they spent money in those host communities as they liked, as they wished. So we now have a legislative framework that compels them to spend a minimum of 3% of their operational expenses. Now, that leaves a lot of room to interpretation. It means that there could be a lot of manipulations. But unfortunately, there are also conditionalities, because you referred to the fact that we've seen this bill before it ultimately became an act. Now, the conditionalities that This 3% of operational expenses is actually coming to the host communities for free, because they are now being educated on good behavior. They have to behave well. They have to keep the peace and ensure that oil installations in the host communities are well kept, or else they will lose that statutory provision for them. So you see, it's a forlorn situation for host communities, and that's why when we are talking about the speed with which the presidency is ensuring the implementation of the act that was assented to a few days ago, we should also see it being implemented to the extent that host communities will be very hopeful that they will get something substantial in the immediate as well.
Good. Because of time, let's move a little bit forward. The GMD of NNPC was here. He said that amounts to about 500, million, and that's quite huge, because people were not understanding the amount that will culminate to. You heard Oji now talk about how we have had to wait, but in spite of all these good commentaries coming from the governors, have picked 6 holes. They are saying it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, of course.
Now, one of such holes, they say, is that it denies states its fair share of funds from the Federation account. Your sense of why the governors are calling it a disaster, what do you think?
I think, well, that's an issue of self-interest. But I think they should have moved beyond to consider the fact that when you now begin to empower communities directly with that kind of money that is which ought to, without the interference, without the influence of governors, there could be a lot of trouble. Now you're actually going to now have communities scrambling, leadership of communities scrambling over these monies. We are going to have, on a predictable note, unending crisis in these communities as a result of these new statutory fund that is coming to host communities. Now, the governors have seen that. Perhaps they thought they would have been better managers, and we need to look at the economics of how the monies that ought to have come to them. But certainly, we'll give the President Buhari's regime the credit of blazing the trail of getting the PIB enacted, and the speed with which it's being implemented. But we need to say it because there are a lot of pitfalls indeed, one of which the governors are pointed. There will be a lot of crisis in those communities. And I mean, look at the uncertainty of the fact that even if we have unscrupulous companies busting oil pipes just to punish some communities that are non-compliant, so many uncertainties. So we really need to look at the situation where we are talking about the implementation steering committee at the moment. They need to look at those critical areas because we want to see peace reign in Niger Delta so that we don't keep having the war over there. The country suffers lack of revenue, and then degradation continues, and then we also have a war-torn area as a result of scramble for petty resources in the way of this 3% operational expenses
that need to be looked at. And of course, this committee has about 6 months before, NNPC Limited. 1 year is the time given to them, but of course, the NNPC Limited will come into existence in 6 months. So hopefully some of these issues raised will be sorted out.